What's going on, guys, and welcome back to my second video of the day. We did the BFR prior to this. Now we're going to be doing what I like to call the pressure power rankings. Going into the playoffs and that sort of thing, who has the most pressure on them to win in the playoffs, and who that missed the playoffs had the most pressure on them that blew it. So we'll start with the teams that blew it. We'll start at 16 at Chicago and 15 at Arizona. No one expected them to be good. Everyone knows they're going to be bad. That's easy to talk about. There's no pressure on them. Montreal as well. They were the worst team in the league last year, so they're fine as well. Anaheim, people expected them to be better. That's why they're higher up, but they're still rebuilding. San Jose, a team that needs to admit that they're in a rebuild, but they won't, so that's why they're even higher. Philadelphia, they try to fix things. Hopefully now that Danny Briere, the interim GM, said they're in a rebuild, hopefully that they'll finally start treading in that direction. Columbus, because they brought in Johnny Gaudreau, signed Patrick Laine long term. Have a bunch of young guys like Kent Johnson and Cole Sillinger were expected to be better. That's why they're 10th. Buffalo, although I didn't have that pressure on them, there was some pressure by the end of the year that they might get in. They were very close to getting in. Next year the pressure is definitely going to be applied a bit, as it's been a very long time since they last made the playoffs. It's been since 2011. It's now been 12 seasons, and now they hold now the New York Jets hold the longest streak, and then Buffalo for the longest droughts in professional sports because the Sacramento Kings made the playoffs in the NBA. Detroit and Ottawa in the similar boat. They were both expected to be better, which they both were. However, Ottawa I had in the playoffs. Detroit I had just missing. So that's their kind of pressure right there. Nashville and St. Louis, I had them both in the playoffs. They were both supposed to be in the playoffs. And St. Louis just kind of fell apart, and Nashville just wasn't good enough. It's as simple as that. Nashville was playing good, but just they could never get above the line that they needed to. Vancouver coming into this season was supposed to be good, and they fired Bruce Boudreau, and then they had an easy schedule the rest of the year to make it look like they were actually decent. I'm not fooling for that next year. Capitals, Penguins, Flames, all were Capitals less so, but with Ovechkin, there's going to be a lot of pressure on them to win. And, of course, Kuznetsov demands a trade. Pittsburgh, Crosby, Malkin, Letang, you sign them to those big contracts, and you trade away even more of your picks. Ron Hextall is on the hot seat, that is for sure, for missing the playoffs. In Calgary, they made the biggest trade of the offseason for Tkachuk for Huberdeau and Weegar. Not only do they get Huberdeau, Weegar, and Kadri, they managed to miss the playoffs somehow. And, yeah, it's very interesting how they were able to do that. And they were close by the end of the year, but still, you cannot miss the playoffs with that roster that you have. You have Kadri, Huberdeau, Toffoli. On defense, you have, of course, Hanifin, Weegar now. In net, you're supposed to have Markstrom, who's not been playing well, and Vladar, who started the season off well, who's not playing well now. Calgary, it's going to be very interesting what changes they go through in the offseason, if any, or if they decide to run it back and say that the season was a fluke. Most inconsistent team I've ever seen. So that concludes the teams. That's just a short sum up of teams that missed the playoffs that had the most pressure applied to them. Teams that are in the playoffs that had the most pressure. It's hard to not start with Colorado. Landeskog got for the playoffs, so that's already a big piece gone. They won the Cup last year. There's not that much pressure on them to repeat. Winnipeg barely got in. They shouldn't be here, to be honest. Not much pressure on them as well to win. And if it is a sweep in 4, I mean, I guess you can argue there's pressure there because they might get blow up the core, but either way, I don't think there's that much pressure on Winnipeg to win. New Jersey, it's their first time here. They're going to be back for a lot of years to come with this core. And there's not much pressure on them, especially going up against the Rangers, who are an experienced team and their rival. So if the Devils end up losing that series, I don't think the Devils fans will be upset, but they'll realize it's probably a learning experience for their guys. Seattle's first ever time in the playoffs. Not much pressure on them either. Actually, I'm not sure why I put Seattle ahead of New Jersey. I'm going to fix that right now. But I probably should have adjusted the magnet space for that. But yeah, Seattle, I'd have less pressure than New Jersey. Whoopsie. Because, where might that marker go? Because, again, this is a team that's not made the playoffs before. It's not a lot of experience. They never played in the playoffs together. Burakovsky, of course, is going to miss the first bit of the playoffs if they get that far, so we'll see how Seattle does in their first playoff appearance. Tampa's been to 3 straight finals, not much pressure on them, but to win the Cup again, that's where the pressure comes in. LA, second year in a row in the playoffs. Compared to other teams, I just don't think they have as much pressure. Same with Minnesota. They've been in the playoffs for a while now, and they haven't really done anything in them. And even though they have guys like Kaprizov and Hartman and Zuccarello and Talbot and Fleury and Net and Spurgeon and Dumba on the blue line and all these guys, they haven't been able to do anything because they come across opponents that are much better than them. It's just very inconvenient for them. Islanders, they get back in the playoffs, and I think there's more pressure on them because the core that they have is not necessarily the youngest. If Barzal comes back and he pairs up with Horvat, we can see how that will go for them. But other than that, Islanders, not too much pressure on them, kind of in that middling pack as well. Florida barely clinches the playoffs. There is not too much pressure on Florida. There's pressure on Florida because of the deal they made last offseason, Huberdeau and Weegar for Tkachuk. So there's pressure on Florida. That Tkachuk trade's worked out beautifully for them. It's worked out a lot better than the Huberdeau and Weegar trade for Calgary. So Florida, we'll see if they can. I doubt they'll be going up against Boston, so there's not too much pressure. But if they do manage to beat Boston, that would be something. That would be something. Vegas at 7. I'd say previous years they've had more pressure, and now I feel like there's just not been a lot of focus on Vegas, not a lot of attention. So we'll see how Vegas does. Dallas at 6, the best team not best team in the West, but I think best team on paper in the West, where they can roll 4 lines on you, and definitely one of those teams that I'd be scared to come across in the playoffs. They went to the final 3 years ago. A lot of that team is still there, so we'll see how that goes for them. Now the East is where the most of the pressure comes in. Carolina, Rangers, Toronto, Boston. Boston, for obvious reasons, they're the President's Trophy winner. There's a lot of pressure, and this could be the last go around with this core. Toronto, they haven't gotten past the first round since 2004, and they're playing Tampa again. Will this be the year that they do it? There's tons of pressure on them. The Rangers, because they bring in Patrick Kane, Vladimir Tarasenko, there's going to be a ton of pressure on them as well. And Carolina, there's pressure on them every year because they're consistently one of the best teams in the league. Edmonton, McDavid, Draisaitl, historic year for McDavid. Edmonton was a lot of people's picks before the season after going to the conference final last year. They're my pick for sure to come out of the West. We'll get to that when we get to playoff predictions. But yeah, Edmonton I think has the most pressure on them. So that's why I really want to keep this short today, because I know the last time I did a pressure index, it went like 20 minutes, and I decided I can just do a quick recap of this, and it's been about 8 minutes. So I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I shall see you guys in the next one. Trying to get a bunch of videos done here. Not promising they'll all be done today, but we'll see. So thank you guys so much for watching once again, and I shall see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.